I'm Steve Vibronics, and this is the Life in Dub podcast, talking to people who live their lives in dub and reggae. Welcome to the 6th Life in Dub podcast, my series of in-depth interviews with people who've lived their lives in dub and reggae. I've been receiving some great messages of support, suggestions and questions from many of you out there, so thanks for that and keep them coming. Welcome back to all those who follow Life in Dub, and hi to any first-timers. Don't forget you can go back and check out all of the previous episodes at any time. As ever, don't forget to subscribe to the show, and as usual, you can email me at vibronics@gmail.com, and you can visit the podcast website lifeindub.com. This week, I wanted to talk a bit about albums and about singles, and more importantly, I want to ask the question, is it still worthwhile to make an album? I love albums. I was brought up in the age where albums, across all musical genres, were celebrated as the best way for an artist to really express themselves and the best way for audiences to really dig into what an artist had to offer. I still love albums, and I think in terms of albums for most projects that I get involved in. But this year with Weeding Dub, we decided against it for our new project. At least to begin with this year, we're only releasing singles. Singles have always been the musical artillery of sound systems. Who plays a whole album on a sound system? But even in our beloved sound system roots reggae scene, albums have always been important. But now it's the year 2020 and people listen so differently to music, with instant and pretty much free access to just about everything ever released. So I kind of have this open question. Are albums still important? I still love making them for sure, but over time, do people really listen to those album tracks between the hits and the anthems? All of the tracks? Or do people just choose what to listen to, pick out the biggest tunes or just selected favourites? If this is the case, then is it worth spending so much time in the studio producing tracks that just end up lost on albums? I really don't know the answer to this, and for sure, I'll continue with making albums despite the singles-only experiment with Weeding Dub this year. But how do you listen to music? Do you dig into older albums all the way through, or skip to the best bits? Feel free to let me know, because I'm sure the answers are much more complicated than I think. This week, my guest is Russ Disciple, one of the founders of the UK dub and roots scene from the late 1980s right up to now. Disciple's music has always been a major influence on Vibronics, especially those legendary 90s tunes like Prowling Lion and Return to Addis Ababa, still so fresh sounding and still influencing producers today. I interviewed Russ over the phone, so please excuse the odd audio glitch. I'm sure it won't stop you from enjoying this fascinating insight into Russ and his musical journey. So, enough of me, let's get on with the interview. So, Russ Disciple, welcome to the Life in Dub podcast.
Hey, Steve.
Very pleased you could join me, although you're all the way down there on the south coast somewhere.
I'm on the south coast, Bexhill-on-Sea. Just, 2-minute walk to the seafront. It's all right, When the sun's out, it's nice down there.
Well, I think Leicester is the second furthest city from the sea in the whole country. We can only dream of the sea up here.
Well, I never had no thought about it before, but, having to move and stuff, it sort of seemed like a good idea. So
one thing I'm trying to ask everybody who's on the podcast is to name a track that they heard, and from when they heard that track, they look back and it's like, well, that kind of changed everything for me. There was no turning back after hearing that. So I was wondering if you've got a track you can think of.
Yeah, well, I've kind of mentioned it a few times. There was obviously that, the kind of first tracks that I ever got into that kind of I was, okay, before that I was into, the Stooges and Jimi Hendrix and punk and what have you. And then, once punk had finished, then it was just like, what else? And having an older brother who was into some reggae, it was just like, what was something to kind of check? So it was Dr. Amentado and Joe Gibbs, Dub Chapter 3. They was kind of like the introduction kind of pieces of music. But I suppose musically for my career, it was kind of, I suppose the turning point really was first time going to Shaka, and hearing some tunes I mean, I've kind of mentioned it before, but there was one particular tune, well, there was a few particular tunes, but the one particular tune that he had played on that first night that I went, that I'd had the record on a 12-inch. I'd bought it in a record and tape and stuff. It was Johnny Clark.
But they're so different on the sound, aren't they?
Yeah. It was a Johnny Clark tune called "Your Love Is With I," on a Greensleeves 12-inch backside of "Bad Days Are Going." And you know, "Bad Days Are Going" is kind of like a bit of a known boom tune. But compared to Johnny Clark, you know, circa 75, 76 with Bunny Lee, King Tubby's dubs and stuff, it was kind of like, it was a bit ordinary, you know. The mixing was kind of like, wasn't nothing special on the 12-inch. It just kind of let the rhythm run, and you know, didn't do too much. And I got rid of the record, you know, because it just wasn't, to me, it just wasn't like classic Johnny Clark. Yeah, it was, you know, you was picking up them tunes in record and tape for, you know, 20p, 40p, so it didn't seem like a big loss to get rid of it. But, you know, some months later, you know, going to Shaka First Dance, and he's played this tune, and it's just like, whoa. You know, it's like, that's what it was made for. It was made for this thing here, you know, the sound system and stuff. And, you know, and I kind of recognise that tune there. And I had to go back out and you know, find my way down Record and Tape Exchange and buy the tune back again.
What sort of period was this?
Well, this was in 86.
Okay.
You know, that was, I mean, I'd been making a little bit of music, you know, for about a year up to that point, but mostly it was just, you know, doing over old favourite tunes, Studio One and stuff like that. Had very little idea of being able to do my own bass lines and stuff. I suppose because, you know, you was doing it in your bedroom, you know, you didn't have, you know, you couldn't have it kind of like sounding loud and stuff because your neighbours and things. So you're always kind of running it at a sort of low level, which is kind of fine. You know, these days I listen to most music at low levels, and I'm quite happy with that, and I'm aware what the tune is doing and stuff.
It's your experience of hearing so much music on sound systems that probably allows you to listen to it quietly now, because you just know how it's going to drop, but that's because you've heard it drop so many times.
That's right, yeah, that's it. I mean, that was the thing, you know, it was just like after going to Shaka that first time, it was just like, you know, a bell rung in my head. It's all of a sudden you can kind of figure this is how tunes are meant to sound. So even if I'm sitting there in my little studio and my bass is going dooga dooga doong, it's like in my head I can hear it, you know, as it's coming over Shaka speakers. It's not going dooga dooga doong no more. It's going boom 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 boom. You know, so it kind of in your head you can hear that now. So you get an understanding of how bass lines work, you know, and that's. So I suppose that was a kind of revelation to me.
And this is like Shaka 86. Now, a lot of people talk about how by that sort of time it was maybe down to the more faithful followers of kind of, because people have moved on, and a lot of, you know, the masses have got
very
into
much
other
so.
music.
I mean, there wasn't really any other sounds. I mean, not that I kind of particularly looked for other sound systems, but there wasn't really that kind of you know, most of the big sounds from previous, you know, that Shaka might have played back in the 70s or early 80s and that, they'd all moved to dancehall. You know, there was that video that was a show, I think in Birmingham or somewhere around 85, 86. Big show where they got all these renowned sound systems from around the country, you know, to play on a stage, you know, to do selection on the stage, and you see some of these big old time dreads up there and blah blah blah, and they're all busy playing dancehall, you know. That's the way it kind of gone. It was only Shaka. Shaka was the only one that stood up there and played some roots.
And what was the Shaka dance like in 86? Especially for the people who are listening, maybe 86 was maybe a long time before they were even born. Then what could you expect? This is in London in 1986. I mean, it's a different world, isn't it?
Well, it was. I mean, it was quite an experience. I mean, you know, even at that time, he still had his old boxes and stuff, them old double face things that had Jar and Shaka sort of hand carved into the boxes and that. You know, you sort of. I mean, we was kind of naive and got to the venue sort of, you know, when it's saying, you know, 9 till 6 a.m. and we're there at 9, and it's just like, you know, Shaka don't turn up at 9 o'clock in the evening to set up. You know what I mean? It's just like more like midnight, you know. But So we was there from the off, so we see the whole part of it, the stringing up.
For your first session, you get to see the sound string up and everything.
String up, cables all going across. It's none of this like nice, neat, tidy cables, taped under the floor and all that kind of stuff that people are doing now. It's just like cables, spider webbing across the ceiling and stuff, you know what I mean? Just like them pictures that was in the NME from 1981. I don't know if you remember that article that was written on sound systems back then. And the front cover had a picture of, inside a venue, and there's just all these cables going all across the, above people's heads and stuff. It was just like that. So, seeing that experience. And then, when he puts on the first tune and you get that sizzle of the tops, and the kind of little crackle of the
realise you're in for something else.
You're in for something else, and then it's just like, you hear that, and then the mid-range sort of comes in and stuff, and it's like you're starting to recognise the tune, and you think, yeah, and then, suddenly the bass turns up, and boy, that's just a next level experience, you know what I mean? People these days, it's like, it's kind of like, it's all been there and done, I mean, nobody, I don't think, is that impressed. I mean, people are more impressed about, how many tens of thousands of watts, people are playing and stuff. But, at that time there, if you didn't go to sound system, you wasn't aware of them kind of levels at all.
Well, I know from my perspective, like when I started going to sound system was like, I want to make music for these sound systems. I want to hear the music I made on these sound systems. This is what I want to make music for. I don't know if you had a similar kind of effect on you.
Oh, totally. I mean, it was no more sort of doing over Studio One tunes and stuff. It was just like, it's like, oh, we got to make music that drops like this. You sort of, you had two kind of things to it. It's like one, that understanding of how the music drops, and then that understanding of like the style of music. Shaka was a very focused part of the scene, very, very focused on a style of how the rhythm drops and stuff. So as much as you can like a soft tune in italics, it's just like, you don't go to Shaka to hear soft tune, you know what I mean? So you wanted to hear serious tune, so... so that was, again, it was just like, that focused, what we was sort of trying to do with making music as well.
So look, while I was talking about making music, we just rewind a bit then. When did you start actually becoming interested in making music yourself? I mean, did you learn any music or anything? I mean, how did all that stuff start?
Not really. I mean, I sort of, I'd picked up bass when I was 15. So, that was 1976. Not for reggae, obviously. I mean, the first bass line I sort of, my brother sort of showed me to play was a tune called Grip by the Stranglers. So, it was just like that kind of thing there.
It was all happening then. That was the time, wasn't it?
I suppose so. But again, we was out in the suburbs. We weren't sort of, inner London punks and stuff. So we was never really... I mean, my brother joined a kind of little local band for a while, and I used to go along with him to the rehearsals. He actually played guitar, like rhythm guitar and stuff. He wanted to really be doing that, but they wanted him as a bass player, because they already had their rhythm guitar. So my brother didn't have a bass, I had a bass, so he wanted to borrow my bass to play with his band and stuff. So, that I used to go along with him and stuff. And kind of, it was interesting, you know what I mean? It's like you can, you kind of had thoughts of like, this would be good to do and stuff. But
I think when you see music being done, it's kind of, because music's a bit of a mystery until you see people actually doing it, and then it's like, oh, maybe I could do that, because I know I had I wanted to make music, but I just didn't know how to do it until I saw some friends do it, and then it's like, right, so if they can do it, then surely I can have a go.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of differently, I mean, I never took it seriously from that time, it's like once that kind of, that little thing with that band sort of finished and stuff, it was just like, that was it. I just become a listener to music, same way with my brother as well. But by sort of mid-80s, I just started playing around with music. I had this double cassette machine, and it had mic inputs and stuff. And I used to play a record and then kind of put the mic around the bass, treble and mid-range speakers of me Wolfdales, to kind of remix the sound of of the record and stuff.
With a microphone?
With a microphone, yeah, because, you put it to the mid-range and all you're recording is the mid-range speaker. Then you bung it to the bass and it's like all you're getting is the bass, you know what I mean? And then you could do some weird thing with putting out, if you had two mics in, I used to put one in the middle of the room and then this one around the speakers. And if you pulled one of the mics in and out, it would go from mono to stereo. And it just did this really kind of weird thing, which was kind of interesting,
They're like the initial sound experiments that get you interested in, like, what is sound and, like, how can I kind of manipulate it? And
then I started to see, in 85, they started, there was things like Porter Studios starting to come out and stuff. And I was 24 then, sort of doing that boring thing, of a 24-year-old of going down the pub and 3 times a week and wasting money on booze. And I was never much of a boozer anyway. But, you just go down here and you talk the same talk, tell the same jokes with your friends, week in, week out. And just, by 24, it's just like, that's kind of like, oh, gosh, it's mind-numbing. It's just like, this ain't an interesting life. And then I see in these magazines, the thing like the Porter Studio, the little 4-track, and it was kind of, although it was expensive, it was kind of affordable as well, because it's like if you wanted a 4-track machine before the Porter Studios, you had to go and buy, a big 4-track TIAC reel, and them things were expensive.
And you needed cables and a desk and all sorts of things.
You needed all of that as well. So, you'd be talking grands just to get yourself up and running with that kind of thing. Whereas when the Porter Studio come out, it was just like, okay, it was 500 odd pounds. It's like, that's still a lot compared to nowadays where you could buy a computer for 500 pounds and Cubase, LE or something, and you're off, you know what I mean? But, okay, you get the Porter Studio. They started to come out with cheap drum machines. I bought one of them little Roland drum machines, the little silver box ones.
Like the 808 or something?
It's not wasn't it 808, what was it? I can't remember what they called it now. But I think some of the hip-hop guys used them later. But, it sounded shit to me, but it was cheap. It was... it was about £180 or something like that at the time, which, I remember going into one local music store down near me. They had a Lindrum. It was a used one. The Lindrum was quite a good drum machine, but it was £1,500. It's just like...
Just a different world, isn't it?
A different world, you know what I mean? But this little Drummatics or something, wasn't it? I think that's what they call Roland Drummatics or something.
That's the one.
Yeah, it sounded really kind of tin pan cheesy and stuff, but it's sort of like, okay, it was something to start with. I had my bass guitar, I had this little 4-track, some cheesy little keyboard that I had, and just started to do some things. I bought
that's the whole band though. You got your drums, your bass, you got your chops, then you're off.
That's it, you're off and stuff. But obviously with dub, you kind of want your little effects and all that. So it was like, I had a little Boss foot pedal delay, which sounded awful. It's like one of them kind of bucket brigade delays. It's got no top end to it, but it's like, it's affordable and stuff. And there was a Boss spring reverb as well. I think something like an RX 100 or something like that. So it's just like you get your little effects and stuff. And I think in my local guitar shop, they had things like little sin drums, little Boss sin drums and a hand clapper. Them things were like £20 back then. There was nothing, you know what I mean?
You've set your little kind of bedroom studio up and you're starting to build some rhythms, and then maybe you've gone to a Shaka session. And because at some point, Jar Shaka actually released Disciple's music, so he obviously played on it, and then he feels strongly enough to release it on the Jar Shaka label. So how did that sort of transition happen? Because that's quite a journey from...
Yeah, it's quite a journey. It happened in quite a short time, really. I've said in interviews before, we gave him a dub plate that had 4 tracks on it, a mix of each track and stuff. We just gave him that to see what it was, what he thought of it and stuff. And he took it, he might still have it, never gave it back. But we had 4 tracks in there. I think one was kind of like an original sort of Steppers track. couple of others were sort of like reworks of things, but it was kind of all fitting for that kind of Shaka vibe, and he heard it and sort of said, if you got anything more and blah blah blah, come to the next dance. The next dance was like the week after, so that revelation of like how to make tunes, come a week after we'd sort of given him the first dub plate and stuff. And so from that it was just like, right, we're going to Shaka every week and we just want him to play more of our tunes. So it's just like, let's build more tunes. And with that understanding of the type of tune, the right type of tune, for Shaka.
Do you remember hearing when you first heard your own production on the Jar Shaka
sound
system?
It was a few months in because, again, being naive, suburban guys, we'd still get to the sessions early.
Did you make it all the way till 6 in the morning?
No, we didn't, it was a few sessions before we made it to last of that time. So, usually come 2 or 3 o'clock, we're sort of like, our eyes are sort of starting to droop now. And he's not even got into dub plate at that point. He's still playing on, plastic and stuff. So, but then we kind of, so we didn't hear our own tunes for a little while, but then we kind of did make the effort. It's like, okay, we need to stay, once we kind of understood, the kind of layout of how Shaka runs a dance and stuff, it's like, okay, we need to stay to the end. And that first time of being in a dance with him playing one of our tunes, is like, I can remember the sort of, hearing the intro drum roll and stuff, and
you knew from then that's one of mine.
Yeah, that's mine. And I'm a white guy, in a dance that's, if I can count the amount of white guys in this dance on one hand, that's how many other white guys there were. It was just like mostly still black people at that time. There was a little contingent of Asians in one corner that had been going for a couple of years or so. And I'm just kind of thinking, these guys are just going to know it's done by some white guys and just kind of like stand there,
leave the dance floor.
Yeah, they're all just going to sit down for 5 minutes while Shaka runs our tune or something. But and I can kind of feel the tension in the back of my neck and stuff. It's just like, oh God. But then he plays it and everybody's sort of going bonkers to it, and it's just like, I'm thinking, wow, And we was unknown. Nobody knew us. Shaka didn't sort of call us. He didn't sort of stand there and dance. Yes, it's them 2 guys over there.
And over in the corner, this is Russ who made this tune and his brother. And there's none of that.
I think in a way, I remember him sort of saying to us, he kind of wanted to keep it quiet because he kind of did know it was just like, it wasn't a thing that white people had been making this music, and there could be some prejudice against it. I think there was a little bit. So he kind of felt that he just kind of let it just sort of let the music play to them, let them get into it, and once that's kind of accepted, then it can kind of become more known and stuff.
Well, I remember when I started getting into it, and this is like in the 90s, and like buying your music and like Alpha and Omegas and Dougies and whatever. And then there's no pictures on the sleeves. And in those days in Leicester, it was still very much a black thing. And I just presumed that the music was part of that was part of that whole culture, and I didn't realise white people were involved in it at all. And it was only when Barber from Abershani told me, he said, "Oh yeah, well Russ Disciple's a white guy." And back in those days, there's a lot of mystery around everything.
Totally, and Shaka knew that, so that was his kind of idea, was just to let the music speak for itself first. But at the same time, you had guys like Manasseh that was on the radio and stuff, and it kind of come out of its shell over a period of a few years. It sort of all come out of its shell. You started seeing more white people at the dances, even before the culture promotion and things. Through Manasseh and Joey J being on the radio, it just kind of it sort of made it kind of like safe for white people to be involved in this music, I suppose.
So going back to like your music being played by Shaka, then like how did things progress from then for you? Because it must have, because I remember when I first heard my tunes being played, it's like you really, it just gives you a lot of confidence, because when you start out you've got no confidence and you just think, oh, I made these tunes and whatever, and to hear them alongside tunes that you love is quite a powerful thing.
I don't know. I mean, to me it was just, it kind of was like a hobby, and it sort of remained like a hobby for a good sort of number of years. I was just kind of happy making tunes and giving them to Shaka. Even when he was putting out albums, I never saw it as like, this is my musical career. It just didn't seem kind of real like that. I was still in awe of reggae music. I was still in awe of, Augustus Pablo and, freedom sounds and what have you. So, to me, I was just a little guy doing a thing and giving the music to Shaka. It was only because you started to get to know more people in the music business that you start to kind of realise, it's maybe it is something that we can pursue more intently.
And the sort of the technical stuff, then obviously, because like Disciple's productions for me have always seemed to be like high fidelity and high quality and whatever, and it's kind of where and you got no training, I guess.
No, it's all self-taught. But you use your ears, don't you? You know what I mean? And you kind of, I don't know, I always had a thing when I first started even was like, I could kind of hear into a tune.
Because obviously, cause I think of like the stuff you did on the Shaka label and then releasing his albums and lots of rhythm tracks and whatever. But then I guess for me, like maybe one of the first tunes I ever heard was the Rashida stuff. I remember it sounding really fresh at the time, and it still sounds fresh now. But you must have been like, kind of, I guess, at the forefront of
things have kind of moved on. I'd moved out of the bedroom and I built the studio in the back garden and stuff. So, and I think even by that time I kind of expanded what I was doing. I'd got into the whole MIDI equipment stuff. So it was less using any kind of live instrument and stuff. It was just like using drum machines and sound modules and synthesizers and stuff like that.
But that seemed to be a big release at the time, and I remember just hearing it everywhere. So I don't know how it was for you.
Well, it's Roots Records, obviously, when you're doing your own thing, you're kind of like, okay, you can maybe afford to go and get the record pressed, and you can do the running around to the record shops and maybe a distributor or two, what I mean? But you don't know nothing about promotion, and, there wasn't the same kind of levels of promotion that you could do these days. There was no internet or anything like that. So unless you kind of really knew how to promote your stuff, you didn't do any promotion. You gave it to your tunes to Shaka. That was the promotion, what I mean? Maybe you'd send it to John Peel, and hope to get some radio play and stuff, which used to play a few tracks. Rodigan played some of the tracks and stuff. But Roots Records was an established record label. They might have been relatively small, but they were established and they had their network. So I think they had some distribution that could get out into some other countries and stuff.
And that sort of early 90s time as well is that your music seemed to have a bit of a wider appeal as well. It's being played in the kind of the hardcore roots dance. It's being played at your Jar Shaka sessions. But there were some other people in the sort of techno and other kind of fields who seemed to be kind of get tuned into what you were doing as well.
Well, there was a lot of that, I mean, it was, through all the different tunes and stuff. And it was kind of like the scene was sort of coming more overground as well. It's like there was an interest from outside of our scene into our scene. So, people from techno and things were sort of looking at some of it. Some of it was interesting to them. I mean, there've been UK dub around for ages, but I remember when going to my distributor in 93, which was SRD, Southern Records, and they didn't want to take my first tune, Prowling Lion. They didn't know us. I remember the guy sort of saying to us, "Oh, we got all Shaka stuff, we got all Mad Professor stuff." I think they had all Black and Mixes stuff, guys that had been around for a few years and all that. But they said it wasn't selling; they couldn't sell it, so they wasn't really that interested in taking anything new.
They couldn't sell Prowling Lion.
Well, they didn't know Prowling Lion, so they took one copy and didn't kind of know it and stuff. I mean, they didn't have that vision of doing anything with it. But on our scene, it's sort of like, you know, Joey J was playing it hard, both on the radio and on his sound system and stuff. And people were just taking notice of it. And you had things, you know, you had some magazines and things that was kind of coming out at the time, you know, not reggae magazines, but other kinds of magazines. And they might have a little article that was on, you know, some of the tunes from our scene and stuff, and our things would get kind of included into that. Because I suppose it was new and fresh, people were looking at it. And so it sort of, you know, it bubbled quite solidly at the time.
Especially those, like, because you got like the Rashida stuff, like roots vocal stuff, but stuff like Prowling Lion, like instrumental stuff. And I remember it sounded like, it sounded like roots reggae, but like roots reggae I'd never heard before at the time. It was really, it just sounded so modern and fresh. And I could see people around me who weren't into reggae were kind of like, oh, what's this tune? This is amazing.
I suppose, I mean, the thing about with Rashida is, I mean, the album as a whole, if you check it, is quite sort of diverse. So there are tracks that, you know, are obvious kind of sound system tracks. There are tracks that are kind of like a bit more melodic and stuff, because I love Jamaican music, you know, and Pablo was quite a big influence. You know, Pablo, when he was doing things like Ragamuffin Year and that kind of stuff, that sort of new digital kind of sound that was around at that time. You know, and some of the stuff that was coming from jammies and what have you, early Exterminator stuff and all that. So, you know, I liked all that stuff as well, and wanted to bring some of that influence into some of the things that I was doing. I could always see that there was a difference between doing vocal tunes and doing dub tunes. It was like, that was kind of like, they're sort of, although they're kind of interconnected, they're sort of like, two sides to the coin, you know what I mean? They take a side each and stuff. So I kind of knew that the dub stuff has an appeal to a certain type of people, whereas maybe the root stuff doesn't, but it has an appeal to a next set of people and stuff. And I still think that's true.
But also, around that time as well, is you had the sound system as well. I mean, when did that all start?
Again, that was through Joey J, partly because he invited us to do a little guest spot. Really invited my brother, because my brother was doing the Boom Shakalaka magazine. And, you know, obviously through that, you know, people seeing that, you know, we had hopefully, you know, decent taste in the music and stuff. And it was kind of a focused taste, you know, around the Shaka scene and stuff. It was like, you know, Joey J had asked him to do a selection up at a night he was doing up in Dingwalls. So we went along to that. And I had a little cassette tape with a couple of the Rashida tunes, and we decided we was going to bust a couple of them in on the night and stuff, which we did. And that all went kind of down nice and all that. And then Joey started up the nights down in Southall in the community centre, you know, all guesting on his sound. There was, you know, him, us, and Eastern Shear, which was, you know, the local Asian sound from down there, doing these guest nights. And, you know, the first couple of nights that he did, I think he did them as free entry. They was rammed out.
Well, you can't beat a free entry.
You can't beat a free entry, but, you know, obviously it's a sucker punch to draw people in. You know, once they're drawn in, it's like, oh, you can start charging them now, you know what I mean? Which did work, you know. It's like, yeah, because, you know, you got to make people see that there's something interesting to come to. So he did that. So we was doing them things for a little bit of a while. There was always a limitation with playing on someone else's set. You must know that yourself, you know. It's like, especially yeah, you know, keep the bass down, don't go into the red light, and all them kind of things there, you know. So it's like, you know, I kind of just had the idea. It's like, I wonder what it'd be like to get my own sound system, you know. So
crazy talk, that is.
Yeah, you know, the mad idea of getting your own sound system together. It's like, it was just like, this seemed really kind of interesting, you know. So it's like, yeah, just go into it, you know. Let's see what it costs. You know, them days there, it was like, go to your bank and get a bit of a loan, borrow some money from here, borrow some money from there. see what you can do, that's affordable and stuff. So
you built the sound, and then you were ready to play out with it. And when did you first start playing out?
I think it was 91. I kind of get lost on the timeline a little bit. It seemed like it was 91. I think we started playing with a sound system.
And how was it having a sound? Because I've never had one myself. I've been lucky enough to be invited to play on so many sounds, which I love to do, but I've never had a sound myself. I've always focused on the studio and the label. So how was it?
If you want to lose money, get a sound system. It was all right. It was kind of interesting. I did kind of enjoy it at times. But, I always kind of felt afterwards, it was just like, I remember more about all the stuff of moving the sound system, clearing up the sound system, checking the sound system, wiring the sound system, than I do ever remember playing the dances. Your head's sort of more bogged down with the technicals of it all than anything else. So
there's a lot going on. People don't realise when they turn up at the dance and just enjoy it, they don't realise what's going on just to physically make all those things happen. So get those boxes in the room, get them all playing. It's kind of it's a mission.
It is, and it's a certain mission. And it's like we never, through the 4 or 5 years that we was going, we never really had a proper crew as such. We used to have a couple of guys that helped us, but basically it was just me and my brother. So it could be hard work sometimes, it's just like lifting all them boxes and stuff like that. So, and then obviously things, you blow a speaker or two in a session and stuff. And it's just like, any money that you got at the end of the session, it kind of went on the van hire and fixing up 2 speakers. So it's like, you'd rarely make any money, even if you was kind of an established name. Very few of the sounds were making money. Only those that kind of could get a residence or something, and were playing out, every week and stuff, which, that don't really happen with every sound system. It happens to very few. So
obviously, the 90s, and it just personally is a very big influence on the stuff that I do, hearing those tunes and kind of those early like Boom Shaka Laka releases and Roots Records releases. But then I remember these like 3 mysterious 7-inches coming out from like Backyard Movements label, and it's like, this is Russ's new stuff. And it was like there was a marked move towards doing more like Jamaican influenced stuff, because like Exterminator and Star Trail and Fat Eyes, and they were all releasing great stuff at the time. And it's kind of, I just wonder how that kind of thing.
Well, I kind of got bored with the dub thing, when we started with the sound system, both me and my brother, we had kind of visions of like it sort of, we'd make connections with Jamaican producers and get unreleased tunes or dubs and this and that, that same kind of history of getting music as we'd seen Shaka. Shaka was still taking himself off to Jamaica or to New York to get fresh tunes and stuff like that. But when we started with the sound system, it was like the dub thing was kind of really kicking off, and it almost become a thing of like it took over. And whereas like for a few years it was kind of like interesting, after a while I'm kind of thinking, but I want to play some Jamaican tunes. And, we was sometimes you could, sometimes, I'm not saying you couldn't.
There was a lot of good Jamaican tunes coming out at the time as well.
There was a lot, but people, the crowds wasn't sort of, whereas we might have been into them and stuff because we listening to them, because we love reggae music and we're listening to them because it's like the production's wicked and blah, blah, blah. And we sort of looking for influences and things like that. Crowds ain't looking at that kind of stuff. They're just looking at what type of tunes they can skank around to. It's like I remember, we used to do some dances at the dub club and stuff. And, we might be playing some new yard tunes and people were just kind of standing around to them. Play a Steppers dub tune and it's just like they're all going kind of crazy bonkers and stuff. But, we love them Jamaican tunes. Why can't people see, feel them tunes the same way as we feel them? I didn't have that when I was going to Shaka in the earlier days. Shaka could play any type of tune, whether it was one drop, Naya Bingy rhythm or whatever, and people would just be moving to them. If they're not moving to them, they'd still appreciate them. You know what I mean? They'd kind of... it was just the vibe was kind of correct about it and stuff. But, by that mid-90s and later 90s period, it was just like, I don't know, it just seemed to change. People just weren't taking that interest the same way. So, for me, in when I started up the Backyard Movements label, it's like, by 95, 96, I was kind of a bit bored of, just endless steppers, dubs.
You've got like 10 years worth of doing these kind of like stepper anthems, and then I guess you need to challenge yourself in the studio and like do something new.
Yeah, and doing something that I was kind of interested in, It's like I was interested in that kind of tune. And you're sort of obviously starting to meet up with some singers, and I had the facility to be able to do a bit of voicing and things. So it just interested me to do. And, I kind of like, them type of rhythms, non-stepper rhythms are more interesting to actually make, because steppers is just boof, 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 a rolling bass line. It's the same thing, one after the other, you know what I mean? But, one drops and stuff, you can move the bass line differently, you know what I mean? And you can put, you can do little patterns with the kick drums and things, which just are kind of more interesting.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, what kind of things would you like to be doing now? I mean, what else, is there more stuff you'd like to achieve?
It's very difficult now, being kind of old school. I'm kind of reluctant to do things like doing high-priced limited runs and stuff, because that to me just don't sit right, you know what I mean? It's just like, I wouldn't want to be the person having to pay £20 for a 7-inch single, you know what I mean? So why would I want to kind of push that onto somebody myself? It's just, them kind of things don't kind of sit right. So then you're kind of stuck with like, okay, it's just unaffordable now to go and voice some artist and put them on a record and sell 300 copies. It's just, it can't work, so... And I think for myself, my whole thing is being in a studio, and you need to be kind of a bit more than that now. You need to kind of be proactive with promotion and them kind of things. And I don't think I've really got, that great knack for promotion.
But you still seem active in terms of mixing stuff for people and producing, and it always sounds really fresh. And obviously, people are coming to you as that they want your sound on their music.
Well, I kind of, I suppose I did make the effort to try and learn my skill. You know what I mean? It is, music is an art form. And it's just like, well, you're not going to get a painting by numbers in the Tate Gallery. It's like you've got to learn your art skill. You've got to learn how to kind of get the sound to come out of itself. What sounds right, good drum sounds, good, guitar sound and all this sort of stuff. I'm still learning that shit myself, but it's just I always kind of have my mind to apply myself to that and try and make it better all the time. You get ups and downs, where you're trying something out and it seems to be going backwards, but then, some months later, it's just like, you've got the gist of what you're trying to get, and now it's a next little level forward and stuff.
Well, one other question that I'm asking everybody on the podcast is, I've got the Book of Dub, so I'm writing everyone's name in the Book of Dub. So, and I'm asking people just to, what do they want written next to it? Something they've done, contributed, whatever. So I'm writing Russ Disciple.
That's a hard one, but I kind of think still learning. Still learning, that should be my epitaph, I think.
Nice. But that's it. But that fits in exactly what we were just talking about wanting to improve the skill and kind of learn the craft more. And it's kind of, because I guess a bit like you, I mean, I'm in the studio a lot, and I still love being in the studio. I'm fascinated by it, and I'm fascinated by sound. And like you say, there's times when it's frustrating and it doesn't work out how you want, because you set yourself high standards and it's not easy to reach those. But it's just fascinating to kind of how to make it better and how little techniques you can learn. And it's like that for me never goes.
But, to me, it's just like, most of what I learned was just by listening. I listened to music. I listen deeply into it, not just like, is it a good song or something like that? How are they doing some of these things? And my mind can kind of, it can kind of figure out some of that stuff, you know what I mean? It's like, and I'll try things. It might not be the way that so-and-so might have done it or something, but my mind is kind of trying to figure out, okay, it's like, it's got this bit of bottom end to it, but it's doing this on something else and blah, 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 That's kind of what interests me sometimes, And at the end of it, you might get a tune out of it.
Well, that's it. And this is something I've said to a few people, is like, the studio isn't for everybody. It's like, it's quite boring for a lot of people, but it's kind of, if you've got that analytical, creative ear, then you just get endlessly deep into it.
Recently, I was watching the video with, it was kind of like a thing on Digital B. look, kind of history of him and stuff. One of his studio boss was saying, it's like he'll spend, a whole year mixing an album and something, you know what I mean? It can take, he'll just be at it just to try and fine tune the whole sound of each track and stuff. And to me, that says more. That says the guy is making the effort to get, Digital B had hit tunes. And he had hit tunes because he made the effort. He didn't just figure, I'm going to knock a tune up in 2 hours, mixed, finished, mastered, and out on the street. It's just this ain't 1976 with the revolutionaries no more. You know what I mean? This is now.
I think you see stuff like Rory Stonelove, and he seems to be quite deep into kind of like production and just trying to
that's what I see. And them guys, you listen to something by Rory, and the sound is just massive. Everything sounds big and clear. I wish I could get that sound. I don't know how he's doing some of that. But then he's got good musicians, that he can call on to do certain things and stuff. And obviously years of being around Jamaican studios and, guys like Stephen Stanley and whoever, he would have learnt the world of stuff from all them guys. We have to be aware that we can't maybe do what they're doing, but we can kind of strive to get somewhere near it, So that was kind of my thinking. Yeah, it's like, I can't play a drum machine like Sly Dunbar or whoever, Steely Cleveland, you know what I mean? It's just like, them guys, that was their thing. But I can do what I can do, and I can do this bit and I can do that bit, and I'll try and make the biggest effort I can on each of them elements to get the whole thing to sound as good as I can. It's like, if it don't sound that good, then it's like, I've still got to learn,
Well, Russ, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast. It's been a real pleasure.
Thanks, Steve. It was a good one, yeah. Good to catch up and reminisce a bit, yeah.
Nice. Thanks again for joining me and Russ for this 6th episode of the Life in Dub podcast. As ever, you can visit the website, lifeindub.com, and don't forget to subscribe to Life in Dub wherever you pick up your podcasts. Of course, feel free to email me at vibronics@gmail.com with any comments and suggestions for the show, and I'll see you all again in 2 weeks for the next Life in Dub podcast.